What if the very trait you believed would set you free is the one that isolates you the most? You've likely felt it before. The ache of disconnection in a room full of people, the frustration of articulating something real only to be met with surface-level replies, the strange guilt that comes from perceiving more than you're supposed to. Not because you're wrong, but because you're right in ways that disturb the consensus. You weren't arrogant. You were curious, analytical, maybe even gifted. You asked deeper questions when others were content with the answer sheet. You lingered in silence while others rushed to speak. You noticed patterns others ignored. You cared more about understanding than winning. But slowly, you started noticing something no one warned you about. The more you saw, the less they wanted you around. You weren't shunned for your failures, but for your clarity. This isn't about intellect in the academic sense. The world has room for engineers, coders, and analysts. It rewards intelligence so long as it stays in its designated lanes. The problem begins when intelligence turns reflective, philosophical, disruptive. When it begins to pull apart the foundations that keep society psychologically stable. What society wants is not intelligence, it's usefulness, predictability, participation. It wants you to perform your role, not question the stage. The moment your intelligence stops serving the system and starts dissecting it, you become a liability. And this isn't new. Arthur Schopenhauer saw it clearly in the 19th century. To be alone is the fate of all great minds, a fate deplored at times, but still always chosen as the less grievous of two evils. Why? Because great minds disturb us. They make us aware of things we'd rather forget, that life is uncertain, that morality is relative, that the truths we cling to are often illusions agreed upon by the majority. So the truly intelligent become mirrors. But people don't want mirrors, they want masks. You begin to notice a cruel irony. The more attuned your perception, the more dissonant your life becomes. The world feels out of sync. You crave deeper conversations, but everything feels rehearsed. You try to connect, but your thoughts feel like static in a frequency no one else is tuned to. Eventually, you begin to wonder if something's wrong with you. But what if this alienation isn't a defect, but a symptom of seeing clearly in a world built on comforting half-truths? Ask yourself, why do people mock what they don't understand? Why do they praise individuality, yet punish deviation? Why does the phrase, "too smart for your own good," exist in the first place? Intelligence should be liberated. Instead, it isolates. There's a psychological mechanism here, a silent survival instinct. Humans, as social creatures, evolved to value harmony over truth. Challenging group norms once meant exile. So today, even in supposedly enlightened societies, the instinct remains. The nail that sticks out gets hammered down. Not because it's wrong, but because it's different. What we call intelligence threatens that harmony, especially when it doesn't flatter collective egos. Carl Jung once noted that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And that's precisely the problem. Truly intelligent individuals don't leave people unchanged. They challenge identities, confront beliefs, and often, unintentionally, expose the shallowness of social facades. You might have noticed this even in childhood. The quiet kid who saw too much. The one who asked why adults contradicted themselves. The one who felt the weight of the world too early. That child often grows into the adult who either learns to hide his mind or suffers for revealing it. Society doesn't hate intelligence. It hates what real intelligence reveals. So ask yourself, what if your loneliness isn't a weakness, but a marker of depth? What if the rejection isn't personal, but structural? What if society's resistance to true intelligence is its defense mechanism against existential vertigo? We're entering a time when superficial knowledge is mistaken for wisdom, and fast answers are worshipped more than slow questions. And in that climate, the truly intelligent are not celebrated. They are quarantined. But this phenomenon isn't random. It has roots, deep ones, in psychology, philosophy, and evolutionary biology. So, what force is quietly shaping this pattern, this deep societal reflex to exile the insightful, the reflective, the non-conforming mind? To answer that, we need to dig beneath the surface, into the unconscious fears of the collective, into the philosophies of suffering and identity, into the structure of the human psyche itself. And it's there, in that darkness, that we begin to see the hidden machinery at work. Beneath the surface of every society, every institution, every polite conversation and social ritual lies a hidden contract. Don't question what keeps us safe, even if it's false. This contract is never spoken, yet it is fiercely enforced. And when someone, driven not by arrogance but by intellectual honesty, dares to violate it, they are not met with admiration. They are met with quiet resistance, masked ridicule, or outright rejection. But why? To answer this, we must descend into the psychological architecture of the human mind, into its fears, compulsions, and its need for belonging. The rejection of the truly intelligent is not a flaw in society. It is a defense mechanism. And like all defense mechanisms, it originates from fear. Let's start with cognitive dissonance, the psychological discomfort that arises when someone is presented with information that contradicts their deeply held beliefs or values. For most people, identity is fused with ideology. Religion, politics, culture, family traditions, all stitched into the fabric of who they believe themselves to be. When someone intelligent comes along and questions the logic behind these inherited systems, they are not just attacking ideas, they are perceived as attacking the person's very sense of self. And what do human beings do when their identity is threatened? They defend it, viciously, often unconsciously. Friedrich Nietzsche once observed, "Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed." This is the crux. Intelligence in its rawest form is destructive. Not in a malicious sense, but in a deconstructive one. It strips away facades. It dismantles illusions. It points to the naked emperor and says, "He has no clothes." And in doing so, it threatens the psychological equilibrium of those still emotionally dependent on the emperor's robes. Nowhere is this dynamic more visible than in the philosophies of Arthur Schopenhauer, the man who looked at life unflinchingly and refused to dress it up. For Schopenhauer, existence was a brutal, senseless striving, a ceaseless will to live, blindly reaching for satisfaction it can never sustain. He didn't offer false hope. He didn't sugarcoat suffering. And for that, he was dismissed during his lifetime, misunderstood, ignored, because what Schopenhauer offered was not comfort, it was clarity. And clarity is rarely welcomed in a world addicted to distraction. Let's look deeper. Carl Jung, a student of the unconscious, spoke of the he, shadow, the repressed parts of ourselves we deny, hide, or project onto others. The truly intelligent often embody this shadow for society. They represent what others have disowned: independence, unfiltered thinking, emotional sensitivity, brutal honesty. And because people cannot face their own shadows, they attack those who reflect them. The rejection of intelligence, then, is a kind of projection. A mirror smashed, not because it is flawed, but because it shows too much. Think about how society defines normal. It's not based on truth, but on consensus. It doesn't matter if the masses believe a lie. If they believe it together, it becomes tradition. And anyone who defies it becomes deviant. This is why intelligence, when coupled with depth, becomes dangerous. Aldous Huxley, in Brave New World, captured this paradox perfectly. In his dystopian society, pain and truth have been traded for comfort and illusion. The citizenry is pacified not by oppression, but by pleasure, conformity, and distraction. And the character who dares to confront it, the savage, is exiled. Not because he is wrong, but because he reminds everyone of what they've given up. Now consider this. What if most people don't want freedom of thought? What if they want security, predictable, comforting illusions that shield them from the chaos of existence? In this context, the truly intelligent, those who see through the veil, are not saviors. They are disruptors, and society reacts accordingly. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre saw freedom as both a blessing and a burden. To be truly free, Sartre argued, was to be radically responsible for your existence, your choices, your values, your meaning. But this level of freedom is terrifying to most. So, people retreat into bad faith, a state of self-deception, where they pretend not to be free so they don't have to bear the weight of their choices. The truly intelligent, however, often cannot live in bad faith. They are too aware, too restless, too committed to authenticity. They refuse to pretend, and in doing so, they disrupt the delicate emotional economy that keeps most people functioning. This psychological pressure is intensified by our tribal nature. Evolutionarily, humans are wired to survive in groups, to belong, to be accepted. Deviating from the group once meant death, and so, the group enforces conformity not with logic, but with emotion, through shame, ridicule, exclusion. Thus, when an intelligent person questions the group's foundational narratives, they are not treated as thinkers. They are treated as threats. Here's the tragedy. The more intelligent someone is, the more likely they are to detect these hidden forces, these contradictions, hypocrisies, falsehoods, but the very act of pointing them out guarantees their social exile. It's a catch-22. You can either see clearly and be rejected, or fit in and remain blind. So the question becomes, why do some people still choose to see? Because for them, truth is not optional. It is oxygen. The intelligent mind, when genuine, is not seeking superiority. It is seeking reality. And even if reality is painful, fragmented, or absurd, they would rather face it than be comforted by illusion. But here lies the deeper, more painful problem. Intelligence without belonging leads to despair. Awareness without connection leads to alienation. And over time, this disconnect begins to corrode the soul. That corrosion is not random. It has consequences. Personal, social, even civilizational. And unless we understand how this silent war between truth and conformity plays out in everyday life, we remain trapped in a system that quietly punishes its most conscious minds. But what are those consequences? They are not obvious. They hide in the corners of relationships, in the architecture of our institutions, in the rising mental health crises that no one wants to explain. You don't see the wound at first. Not clearly. It's subtle, like a tightness in the chest that you dismiss as fatigue, like a silence that grows louder over time. The consequences of being truly intelligent in a conformist world rarely arrive in the form of dramatic persecution. They don't chase you with pitchforks. They don't burn your books. They just disappear you. You're left out of the room where decisions are made, passed over in conversations where ideas are swapped like currency. They call you too intense, too sensitive, too serious. Not because you're wrong, but because you make people feel what they've spent their whole lives avoiding, the burden of thinking for themselves. This is how it begins. Not with violence, but with distance. The slow exile of the conscious mind. You start noticing how your insights make people uncomfortable, how your curiosity is seen as arrogance, how your silence, which stems from restraint, is interpreted as coldness. You begin to wonder if something is wrong with you, but the wound doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the structure that cannot accommodate what you've become. Let's go deeper into this hidden architecture of consequence. 1. Emotional isolation, the loneliness of clarity. The more deeply you see, the more alone you feel. Because depth is not a social trait, it's an isolating one. You begin to understand what Schopenhauer meant when he said, A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. You start to crave solitude, not because you despise others, but because the noise of the crowd suffocates your thoughts. And yet, this retreat into isolation feeds a paradox. While you preserve your integrity, you begin to starve your soul. Humans are social by nature. Connection is not a luxury, it's a biological need. But when your perceptions no longer align with the collective illusion, connection becomes contaminated. Conversations turn shallow, relationships turn transactional, and love, real love, begins to feel mythical. Over time, this emotional starvation can lead to depression, not the kind that comes from chemical imbalance, but the kind that emerges from existential dissonance, when your inner world is vast, but no one dares to enter it with you. 2. Cognitive suppression, the self-imposed muzzle. You begin to censor yourself, not out of fear, but fatigue. It's exhausting to explain yourself again and again, only to be misunderstood. It's demoralizing to watch people celebrate mediocrity while brilliance is dismissed as eccentricity. So you learn to play the game. You dilute your thoughts, you soften your words, you smile when someone says something that makes your mind recoil in disbelief. This suppression isn't just painful, it's corrosive, because intelligence thrives on authenticity. And every time you betray your own insight for the sake of social survival, a small part of you withers. Over time, this leads to cognitive dissonance of a different kind. You know what's true, but you pretend not to. You become a stranger in your own mind. 3. Cultural invisibility. The rise of the entertained and the fall of the thinker. In a world obsessed with speed, novelty, and spectacle, depth becomes invisible. The intelligent are not just rejected, they are erased. The algorithm doesn't reward contemplation. The marketplace doesn't value introspection. Attention has become currency, and the only way to earn it is through exaggeration or emotional manipulation. We now live in what German philosopher Theodor Adorno once called the culture industry, a system that mass-produces distraction to keep people docile. Within this system, the truly intelligent are not seen as guides, but as threats to consumer comfort. The result? Society creates idols out of influencers and silences its sages. The psychological backlash, internalizing the rejection. Over time, the intelligent individual begins to internalize the world's rejection. Maybe I am too much, they whisper in the dark. Maybe I need to change. This is where the tragedy reaches its peak, because once you begin to believe that your sensitivity is a flaw, that your clarity is a curse, you begin to mutilate your mind to fit the world's broken mold. Neuroscience gives this process a name: neuroplastic suppression, the brain's tendency to rewire itself in response to repeated social rejection. The more you are ignored or ridiculed for your insights, the more your brain learns to silence them. Your mind doesn't just go quiet, it rewires itself into compliance, and that is the most dangerous consequence of all. The intelligent begin to doubt the value of their own intelligence. 5. Societal regression, the death of collective insight. But this isn't just about the individual. The exile of intelligence from the social body has devastating cultural consequences. When societies push their brightest minds to the fringes, they don't just lose innovation, they lose wisdom. History is filled with examples. Socrates was sentenced to death. Galileo was imprisoned. Nietzsche died alone and mad. Schopenhauer lived much of his life in obscurity, his ideas only appreciated decades after his death. Again and again, we see the same cycle. The present rejects what the future will one day call genius. Why? Because insight always comes before acceptance. And most people are only comfortable embracing a truth when it's already been sanitized, simplified, and stripped of its sharp edges. So we build civilizations on delayed wisdom. We only listen to those who are dead, because living thinkers are still too dangerous. And here's the final irony. The very traits society claims to admire, critical thinking, originality, authenticity, are punished when actually practiced. What we honor in theory, we exile in reality. This is the unseen trap. Not one of chains, but of mirrors. Not one of violence, but of silence. Not one of hatred, but of indifference. But what if there was a way out? What if the key to surviving and thriving as a truly intelligent person in a rejecting world wasn't in conformity, but in rebellion? Not rebellion for the sake of destruction, but a quiet, radical act of choosing clarity over comfort, regardless of the cost. That is what we must now explore. Next, we enter the fourth stage, the rebellion, how to break free. And in it, you will discover not just how to survive, but how to live as yourself in a world that doesn't understand you. You've been quiet for too long. Not out of choice, but necessity. You learned that silence is safer than truth, that playing small keeps the peace, and that masking your depth makes others feel more comfortable. But at what cost? There comes a moment in every thinking person's life where a quiet line is crossed, a threshold. Not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's a sigh, a walk alone, a book left open on a rainy night. And in that moment, something inside you decides, I cannot go on like this. This is the beginning of the rebellion. Not against people, but against permission. The moment you stop waiting to be understood, the moment you stop needing to be accepted, the moment you realize it was never about them. 1. Stop seeking the tribe. Forge the path. The first lie society sells you is that intelligence must be validated to be real, that you must be discovered to matter, that your insight means nothing until it has been liked, followed, or published. But here's the truth. The most dangerous minds in history were not validated by their time. They were rejected by it. Arthur Schopenhauer published his most profound philosophical work, The World as Will and Representation, at 30, and it was ignored for decades. He lectured in near-empty halls while lesser minds drew crowds. Did he quit? Number. He turned inward. He sharpened his solitude into a weapon, and in doing so he created a legacy that outlived the very institutions that rejected him. What if the path forward isn't waiting to be chosen, but choosing yourself? Let go of the tribe. Stop begging to be invited into spaces that cannot hold you. Stop shrinking your thoughts to fit rooms too small for your mind. Make solitude your cathedral. 2. Practice strategic disobedience. You've been trained to obey, not by chains, but by expectation. Family, school, media, culture, they taught you to avoid discomfort, to play by the rules, to color inside the lines. But rebellion doesn't always look like protest. Sometimes it looks like unlearning. Psychologist Carl Jung called it the individuation process, the inner journey of separating your true self from the social mask you've worn since childhood. He said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But it's not a gentle privilege. It requires disobedience. Disobey the script that says intelligence must be polite. Disobey the rule that says curiosity must be contained. Disobeying the fear that tells you your truth is too much. This isn't recklessness, it's precision. Like an artist chiseling away at stone, you must cut away every belief that wasn't born from your own experience. That's how you reclaim your mind. 3. Cultivate intellectual sovereignty. Intellectual sovereignty means owning your thoughts, fully. Not just forming ideas, but trusting them. Not just consuming knowledge, but synthesizing it into original understanding. This is where most intelligent people fall short. They know, but they do not own. They've read the books, studied the theories, gathered the facts, but they're afraid to declare anything as their own. Why? Because they've been gaslit by mediocrity, surrounded by people who mock conviction as arrogance. But here's what Schopenhauer reminds us. True thinking is solitary. And with that solitude comes responsibility. You must dare to conclude what no one around you will affirm. You must risk being wrong to reach what is true. And when you do, when you stop outsourcing your mind to the herd, you become dangerous. Not in a violent way, but in this way, a lit match is dangerous in a room full of dry lies. 4. Build a life that honors your depth. This rebellion isn't just mental, it's existential. If your entire life is structured to appease those who misunderstand you, then your rebellion must become practical. Work. Don't just chase income. Design work that stimulates your mind. If it's not possible yet, then carve time for passion in the margins, but make it non-negotiable. Relationships. Choose those who challenge your mind, not those who merely validate your presence. Intimacy without intellectual resonance is spiritual starvation. Habits. Make your routines an act of self-respect. Read, reflect, write, think. Not for performance, but for survival. Environment. Curate your space to mirror your inner world. Clean, quiet, intentional. Not a display for others, but a sanctuary for you. This is not selfishness, this is psychic hygiene. You do not owe your suffering to the comfort of others. 5. Find the others, even if they are rare. Now here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to be understood, you become findable to those who understand. When you stop diluting your thoughts, the right minds begin to notice. When you stop begging to be seen, those who can see start appearing. Not because they're many, but because they're real. Build slowly. One conversation, one book, one letter, one project. Over time, you will discover your tribe is not loud, not visible, but they are awake. They too have walked through the fire of rejection, and they too have chosen to keep thinking. 6. Reclaim the word, enough. One of the deepest wounds inflicted on intelligent people is the belief that they are somehow broken, that their struggle to fit in means they are deficient, that they are too much and not enough at the same time. But what if you were never meant to fit? What if you were meant to transform? The rebellion begins the moment you stop trying to earn your worth, when you stop translating yourself into the language of those unwilling to listen. You are not a misfit, you are a mirror. And what they reject in you is what they fear in themselves. This is not an easy path, but no truth worth living ever is. The cost of reclaiming your mind is high: loneliness, misunderstanding, exile, but the reward? Freedom, clarity, power, not over others, but over your own life. And as you begin to walk this path, something will shift inside you. You'll stop feeling like a victim of your intelligence and start feeling like a guardian of it. Because rebellion, in this context, is not about burning down the world. It's about refusing to be burned by it. Now, it's time to go even deeper, to the final place. The revelation beyond rebellion. The ultimate truth that ties it all together. The truth that haunts. The truth that heals. The truth Schopenhauer hinted at, but never fully explained. There is a silence deeper than solitude. It comes not from the absence of sound, but from the presence of truth. You may have felt it. Late at night, when the world sleeps and your thoughts are no longer echoes of others. When the noise of society fades, and all that's left is you, and a gnawing awareness that something fundamental has shifted. This is the final stage of the journey. Not rebellion, not resistance, but reckoning. Because the ultimate truth is not that society rejects the truly intelligent. It's that the truly intelligent eventually rejects society. Not out of arrogance, not out of disdain, but out of clarity. You begin to see that the world you were taught to admire, its rituals, its rules, its noise, is built not on truth, but on distraction. The systems we trust, education, politics, media, even culture itself, aren't designed to elevate the mind. They are designed to control it, to pacify, to numb, to distract the individual from their inner abyss. And when you refuse to be distracted, when you turn inward and pierce through the veil of illusion, what you find is not comfort. You find freedom, but it is a freedom that costs you everything. 1. The burden of clarity. Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone." In that line lies the final paradox. The more you understand reality, the harder it becomes to remain in it unchanged. You begin to see the games for what they are. Social performance becomes exhausting. Small talk becomes unbearable. Chasing status feels hollow. Belonging to crowds feels like betrayal. This is the burden of clarity, the quiet grief of perceiving too much. Not because you want to, but because you can no longer pretend not to. You notice how people rarely listen. They just wait to speak. How opinions are parroted, not earned. How most arguments are not about truth, but ego management. How conformity is rewarded, and authenticity is punished. You feel like a ghost walking among the living, present but unseen. And that invisibility isn't a curse. It's a revelation, because it means you no longer need to perform. You can simply be. 2. The collapse of the false self. At this point, something dies inside you, but it's not your soul, it's your mask. The identity you spent years constructing, the agreeable one, the likable one, the digestible one, begins to fall away. You stop caring about being impressive. You stop curating yourself for others' comfort. You stop translating your truth into a language that dilutes it. The collapse is painful, but necessary, and what remains is something rare, not a version of yourself, but yourself, unversioned, raw, unpackaged, undeniable. This is what Nietzsche meant when he said, "Become who you are." Not created, not invent, but become, as if the truth of you has always been there, waiting to be uncovered beneath the rubble of social conditioning. 3. The cosmic joke. And here is the cruelest, most liberating truth of all. The world you tried so hard to belong to was never real to begin with. Its values were inherited. Its truths were half told. Its norms were accidents of history. Its judgments were projections of fear. You realize that what most people call reality is simply a consensus, a shared hallucination. And the moment you withdraw your agreement, the illusion begins to crumble. You no longer fear being misunderstood, because you finally understand yourself. You no longer crave approval, because you've disapproved of the lie. You no longer chase happiness, because you've touched something deeper, authenticity. This is the cosmic joke. You spent your life trying to make sense of a system that was never built to make sense. You tried to play a game whose rules were written by people who never questioned the game itself. And now that you see it clearly, you can laugh, not cynically, but with the deep, echoing laughter of someone who's finally free. 4. The return to simplicity. Now, the journey turns inward. You begin to find beauty in simplicity. Not the simplicity of ignorance, but the simplicity of wisdom. You find joy in small things, the texture of silence, the weight of a well-chosen word, the soft defiance of a book read slowly. You stop trying to fix the world and start trying to witness it fully. You become a keeper of questions, not a preacher of answers. You stop needing to win arguments and start offering presence. You are no longer a seeker trying to arrive. You are a watcher, quietly becoming. And in this stillness, you touch what Viktor Frankl called the neugenic dimension, the space where meaning lives, not in outcomes, but in being. You understand now that intelligence was never about data or logic or language. It was about consciousness. And you are awake. 5. The final realization. Here it is, the deepest truth of all. Society rejects the truly intelligent not because it fears them, but because it needs to. Because a truly intelligent mind cannot be controlled. It cannot be marketed to. It cannot be scared into obedience. It cannot be sold a life it did not choose. And such a mind threatens everything. Not with violence, but with clarity. You become the mirror that shows people what they've been avoiding. The silence that makes them hear their own noise. The stillness that disrupts their frantic search for meaning. And so, they label you. They avoid you. They mock you. Not because you are wrong, but because you remind them. You remind them that they too once wondered. You remind them of the self they buried to survive. You remind them that freedom is possible, but it is earned at a cost. And now, you must choose. Do you hide your truth again for comfort? Or do you live it fully, visibly, unapologetically? There is no map, no guarantee, no applause, but there is peace. The kind of peace that doesn't come from being accepted, but from being real. You have arrived, not at an answer, but at the beginning. A beginning where you no longer ask, why does society reject the truly intelligent? But rather, why did I ever wait for it not to? This is your mind, unchained. This is your truth, untamed. This is your life, uncompromised. Welcome. Now go. Think louder, feel deeper, and never ask for permission again.